Greetings, and welcome to the 80-Level Roundtable podcast. In each episode, host Kirill Tokarev invites video game industry leaders to talk about the world of game development. No topic is off limits as long as it relates to video game development. New episodes are in the works, so remember to follow us or subscribe and share with someone you know will also enjoy the podcast.
Before we kind of start, could you guys give a little introduction about what you do? What's your role on the project?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kirill, for the introduction. Let me say a few things about the company, about myself. So, My Games is a global gaming brand, and we have around 150 games in our portfolio, and about 80 of them is in active operation. We have about 13 in-house development teams releasing games for PC, consoles, and mobile devices, and also we invest in third-party studios that do games. I'm working on Skyforge, and I'm project lead on the project. I'll say a few things about how we did porting Skyforge on Switch.
Great. So before we kind of go into that direction, why Nintendo Switch? So why did you guys choose this platform? It seems like today a lot of companies are kind of developing games, or rather porting games for that platform. If you go on Switch and you go into the store, there's like lists and lists of new projects added there. I'm wondering what is kind of like the interest there, and why do such big companies as My Games trying to kind of work in that platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, we saw a big growth for Switch player base in recent years. Like in 2019, 2020, it was like a big growth for that platform, especially in the United States. So it.
Do you know like, sorry to interrupt, do you know like a percentage of how big the growth is? Is it like 50 or more?
I'm not sure right now. So we gathered that information when we discussed the porting the game, and right now I can't recall the accurate numbers. So it was I remember it was a huge growth.
Okay, cool.
So it was the big market, and we considered it can boost our player base, our audience significantly, and it's worth investing to the porting the game. But still, it's a hard technical challenge because Switch is very has a lot of resource constraints regarding comparing with the PlayStation and Xbox.
In terms of technology, like from the point of view of the system itself and hardware, what is Nintendo Switch? Is it like a bigger smartphone, or is it a smaller PC? What is this from technological standpoint?
Well, if you put it that way, then we might compare it with the it's more mobile device than a PC. So it doesn't have a separate video memory. It has the not very big amount of memory, and it is focused on battery consumption. So it should, because it's a portable console, it is important so it can maintain for a little bit longer than a few hours of gameplay.
So it's definitely closer to a smartphone, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How do you guys kind of approach porting of your games? Because let me kind of elaborate a little bit. So both Warframe and Skyforge are very large online projects, right? So they are large in terms of player base. They are large in terms of their graphical fidelity, especially I think Warface. I mean Skyforge as well, right? So there's a lot going on there, and the space, the just general space of the worlds, and the number of players. There's an online component there as well, which is also very important. So to me, it seems like a Herculean task to kind of go and bring this huge game to like a very small portable system that you need to think not only about memory and graphical fidelity, but also about battery consumption. So can you maybe break it down what were like the three main things or like five main things that you had to kind of think very hard about before you kind of started this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our goal when we start porting process was very ambitious. We wanted to achieve 30 FPS with at a decent graphic quality, and it should be stable, and it should fit to resource constraints that are more restrict on Switch. So the problems were everywhere. So when in early versions of the game, we had like one of 3 cores of the Switch CPU was completely engaged on sound processing, and that is not good because even the render is not implemented yet, and we need to do something with that, and we changed the way the sound processing works, and we get into another trouble because the size of game client get a lot bigger. It was like 9 gigabytes only for sound, and that's not good for the portable console where you have only 32 gigabytes. And it was tricky, but we managed to solve it. We decided when the game process is not that intense, you don't have a lot of things going on, then we can use the sound algorithm that engages the CPU, but it saves the space on the console, and it worked okay. The next problem we get into was the random access memory. So the Switch has a little bit more than 3 gigabytes, and that's very little. Even for 32 bits applications on the PC, you can get more memory because there is separate video memory on the PC, and it took a lot of time and hard work to make the game to fit in those restrictions on every game level in every situation to keep it stable so it won't crash, because the memory is out. And so the biggest challenge was the optimization process, because we optimized already the game about 3 times before the release on PC, on PS4, and Xbox One. And at some point, we just ran out of creative ideas. What else we can do to keep it going faster and keep it stable? So we have to reduce some effects that made the picture more deep, and reduce the size of textures, because that was the only way. But I should say that on the bright side, we improved the picture on the low settings on the PC, and that was a pleasant surprise. I think I covered the main challenges that we had.
Okay, so you kind of touched a lot of the technical elements, but
yeah,
if we think about it like from like a higher kind of position when you're not nitty-gritty. So what are like the key things that you need to remember when you're doing the porting? Like obviously, like technical restrictions are super important, but maybe there are some elements of gameplay that you need to tweak, or maybe some of the mechanics that need to change. We see a lot of this with mobile ports on Switch when they don't really change gameplay that much, and the game kind of suffers, right? So it's not really fit for this. Even the controls, it doesn't really work with both. I think with your games, it was a little bit different because you did a lot of the console ports before, so you kind of knew how the game is going to perform or work on the on different consoles. But if you would just to think about somebody who is just to start kind of porting their PC online, which is also important, online game to Switch, what are like the main points that you need to take into account when you're doing this, apart from like graphics and
yeah, I see what you mean. So the main things you should take into account that this is the Switch is portable console, and the internet or the power might be just run out in the random point of time, so and a random point of gameplay. So you should be ready for that, and you should to make the getting back to the game as smooth as you can, so the players won't experience, so they want to have to start all over again if something with the internet connection or the battery will go wrong at some point. Also, we did some restrictions for Skyforge on Switch. Is how many players can be at the same time on the certain instance of the map, of the level, of the game level. So you have around 50 players on PC or on PlayStation, and we reduced that amount to 25 for Switch. So to reduce the traffic, to reduce the load on the system, we did something like that. Also, we had to turn off the massive PvP encounters in the game, like where you have like 30 people PvPing each other. So that won't work, unfortunately, on Switch. So we had to turn it off.
I kind of have another question related basically to the games and overall of how economics work in these kind of games. So if you take like Skyforge or Warface, first of all, is this like a cross-platform thing? So basically, players on Switch fight with players on PC, or are they playing in their own?
No, it is a separate server for the Switch. We have different servers for all platforms. So no, unfortunately, we don't have the crossplay, and on each platform, people like playing with each other.
The lack of crossplay, is this because of the technical challenges, or is it because of the more economical and licensing challenges from the platform holders?
Well, when we when we start porting Skyforge on PlayStation 4 and Xbox, the crossplay wasn't possible at that point of time. So we didn't put it into the design. We didn't make infrastructure for that. So when it is possible, I think it's wise to make the game with the crossplay. It will be, especially for online game, it will be better because there will be more players on the server. The competition will be more intense, and it will be more fun in the end. So I suggest it. Yeah.
Do you see this change? Do you see that the companies are like Nintendo? I know that like one of the biggest example of cross-platform project is probably Fortnite right now because they are kind of available everywhere. Do you see this happening with Skyforge, for example?
I don't think it is possible for Skyforge at this point because the game mechanics work that way that we can't merge because the server progress is different for all the platforms and we can't merge it. That's why it is not possible at this point of time for Skyforge. But for the new games that we'll do, we will consider it in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about like Warface and Skyforge in general, these kind of like online games, I'm very interested to learn how does monetization work on Switch? Because we know very well how it works on PC when you can buy some cosmetic items and you can buy some in-game currency or something. But how does it work on Nintendo? Do you build like your own store there? Do you have a different version of the store? How do all those elements connect? Does Nintendo kind of take 30% of all the transactions just as Apple does? Nobody really talks about it. It would be very interesting to know, at least from the high level, like how does it actually work on the platform?
Yeah. So the Nintendo is almost the same as the Steam or PlayStation or Xbox. So you don't need to change the monetization process drastically. You just need to put the items, for example, virtual currency items in the Nintendo Store, and you can advertise it within the game. You have access from the game to the store items. It's not no problem. Very easy, and you just go there and buy stuff, and Nintendo takes the commission for all the transactions, and it's how it works. Basically the same as for PlayStation and Xbox.
So they basically provide you. So just to understand, so you don't have your own store on the platform. Instead, you upload all the items into their store, and the infrastructure is basically Nintendo's or like PlayStation's and so on, and you buy it from the store of the platform.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, yeah. just upload it and learn your game to work with their interface. It's a little bit different for
I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm going to ask anyway. So I'm just going to ask. If you can't answer, don't answer. So if we think in terms of conversion into like payments and in purchases, if you compare like PC and Switch, period to period, like 2020 to 2020 on both platforms, where do they are more entitled to buy? Like, are they really buying on Switch? Because again, from my perspective, which is not a professional, I play Skyrim on Switch, so I don't play online games on Switch. But is there really like this urge to buy on the system, or are they there just for like free game and that's it? Do you see some conversions on the purchases?
I can say that the conversions on Switch are a bit lower than on the PC, but the average check is higher. So if a lot of people don't pay in the game, but if they do, they usually pay more than on the PC.
Do you think it is connected in some way to the region? Like maybe because it's more the player base on Switch and the growth, as you mentioned in the previous question, is bigger in the United States. Maybe it's just because there are more players from United States and they can afford more expensive packs or something.
Yeah, I think that is related, but I'm not 100% sure that it's the main reason or it's an only reason.
Interesting. So you worked with the most interesting thing that when I was approached with this interview is I thought that it's interesting that you guys are kind of doing the ports yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
In a lot of cases, when you have this, first of all, maybe another question before that. So when you're thinking about these ports, when you're building the game, are these in the pipeline in general, or is this more of something like an afterthought and you were like, oh, let's try Switch today or something, right? Do you really think in the beginning that you're going to do this porting, or is this more like a thing that comes later?
Well, for Skyforge and Warface, that's the relatively old games, and when we started the production, we didn't think about releasing them on other platforms. So our main target was PC. But when we get closer to the release, we looked at the consoles, we all play the consoles, and we just say, hey, why not? We can do it. It might be interesting. So it wasn't planned in the very beginning, but for the future games, we will definitely consider at the very early stages of the development on which platforms we plan to release and what is the priority for those platforms.
So why do you want to have this expertise about porting inside my games? Why not outsource it to a different studio?
Well, we tried to outsource it in the different studio, but it looks like doing it internal in-house it is going faster and the quality is better because the devs that porting the game they know the code, they know the game, they written it and they know it very well, know its strong sides, the weaknesses, and they can do they can do the job faster than the outsource.
Dima, and as far as I understand, this is your own technology, right? So this is not Unity, this is not Unreal, right? So this is like a proprietary tech.
Yeah, for Skyforge, we have our own engine, so it's we took the whole process. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So maybe this is one of the reasons why outsourcers don't work. Right?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're talking about the Unity or Unreal, the porting process is well, they already almost have it in the box. So if we're talking about the Unity, you just have the button, make a build for Switch.
I have another question. So my games has first of all, you guys have a store, you have a bunch of games. So Skyforge and Warface, these are not your only games, and you're like one of the biggest kind of publishers and providers of online entertainment, I think, in Russia and probably in Europe. And you're doing a lot of to kind of go in mobile, to go in the United States, to kind of grow in general. With these smaller ports on like PlayStation, on Switch, and so on, how do they fit into like your bigger like ecosystem? Because I think again from I'm just talking about like my ideas. Maybe they're different from your corporate ideas, but you want to have like all your play base under one umbrella, right? So you want to understand what each player buys on what platform, right? And you want to have like streamlined promotions, maybe sales, maybe more streamlined releases. Because I think even when you're updating a game, so you need to update one game on PC, the other on PlayStation, the next on Switch, and these are all different updates. But if you're doing this on large scale, you have to do it simultaneously. So my question is, in the future, maybe, or with other games, do you plan to have some kind of like just overall bigger ecosystem that kind of encompasses all the games in one and kind of streamlines the whole experience from the point of view of online tech and also like monetization and all that other stuff? Do you think it's even possible in terms of because there are so many platforms and so many ways how you need to work with Sony and Nintendo, and these are like maybe additional challenges.
Yeah, but it's what we should do because the markets are they are very big. We also need to work with Apple and with Google for mobile devices and mobile games. So we just need to get the expertise there to in advertising and knowing what players want on each platform, and we can't afford to say, hey, we don't interested in this platform, and because the player base is very big.
You mentioned that the player base is very large, and basically you want to grab the player base on any platform available to kind of get them under your own umbrella. Do you guys compare the number of players on different platforms that are playing your games? Do you ever think that maybe, well, it's such a small number that we really don't want to kind of mess with it? Because I know that a lot of mobile publishers, right? They're coming from mobile platforms to like larger platforms. They think this way. They say, well, we're making enough money on like Apple Store or Android. We don't care about like Switch ports. We don't care about like PC ports because it's just the number of players is not that big, and it's just extra money we need to spend and blah blah blah. And they're kind of like reluctant to do it. So what's your kind of philosophy on that? Do you think even like if there's like 100 players, it's worth the effort?
My opinion is that it depends on the game because the player base on every platform, any major platform, is significant, and you should consider it. But they can either like the game or not. But if you don't have some strong marketing researches about that the game A won't be interesting for the Android players or Switch players because whatever. If you don't have that kind of research, then you should try, and it might be a success. It might not, but at least it was worth to consider. So it basically depends on your product, what the game do you do.
So if you kind of can compare the audiences on, I don't know, like on your consoles, on PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch, do you see like they are comparable, or do you see one platform strongly kind of going forward in terms of player numbers, activities, maybe purchases?
Yeah, we see the difference between platforms and.
Who's winning? Who's like the who's winning? Who's like the the platform to go?
I'm not sure I can answer that.
Okay, don't worry. Okay, that's okay. Okay, so we kind of like running a little bit towards the end, but I have a question. So if you were to give like recommendations to companies who are thinking about porting, especially their PC games, if they're thinking about porting their PC games on consoles or on mobile or somewhere else, what are like the most important things that they need to think about, both in terms of tech and also in terms of like monetization, maybe their business model, all that stuff?
I think they should take into the account either both the porting costs and the let me say it that way. Before making that kind of time and money investment, you should take into the account also the porting costs and the associated costs, especially when we are talking about the online games, the MMO games. It's like maintaining the new servers, the personal expenses, and even commissions for those platforms. And keeping all that in mind, you should make a business decision. If it's worth it, then you go. Considering what features can you implement to make the game more attractive on the certain platform it is good. You definitely should consider it and implement if it is possible, but you might don't want to invest too much in it because some features just won't work for a game, and you will spend time and money to implement it.
I think the idea that you still can check, right? Because as you mentioned, there are very large player bases on all of those platforms, and maybe if you can combine them all, or maybe there is going to be one platform that's going to kind of shoot forward and going to bring you more revenue. So it's definitely a nice space for experimentation, and you kind of have to try if you're in this space anyway. Kind of at least do the market research to learn more.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, guys, thank you so much for doing the call. We'll add all the links to like the interviews and your website as well as on the games in the description, so people can kind of check them out. And also we'll leave a link to your switchboard so people can go ahead and check it both from the technical and the gameplay point of view and so on. Cool, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP, and share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.